Welcome to a story that will keep you from sleeping. A tale where the line between darkness and light blurs, where terror is shaped by human hands. We will dive deep into the abyss of a twisted mind, explore the fear that spread throughout a city, and follow the brave souls who sought to bring the light of justice to a place shrouded in night. This is more than just a story. It's a warning, a glimpse into what might lurk just beneath the surface of everyday life. And if you find yourself captivated, if you wish to continue this journey into the complex, frightening, and sometimes astonishing tales of human nature, make sure you've hit the subscribe button and turned on notifications. Your support allows us to continue bringing you powerful, detailed, and unforgettable stories like this. Now take a deep breath, open your mind, because this story has begun. The Los Angeles summer of 2023 was supposed to be a season of boundless light, an endless sprawl of sun-drenched dreams and neon-lit nights. Instead, it became an epic of shadows, etched into the collective memory of a city that believed itself immune to such primal terrors. The first brushstroke of dread was delivered on a Tuesday, an innocuous day that spiraled into an abyss of fear from which Los Angeles would struggle to emerge. Detective Miles Corbin, a man whose face had been carved by 2 decades of urban nightmares, stood over the body of Eleanor Vance, a 63-year-old retired librarian. The air in her modest Silver Lake bungalow was thick with the cloying sweetness of jasmine from the garden and the metallic tang of drying blood. It was 3 a.m., and the city's hum, usually a comforting blanket, felt like a mocking whisper. Eleanor lay on her Persian rug, her eyes open, staring sightlessly at the ornate ceiling fan. There was no sign of forced entry. No shattered windows, no Jimmy marks on the doorframe. The lock on her back door, a finicky bolt she always secured with meticulous care, remained intact. Her small, impeccably kept home suggested a life of quiet order, now violently disrupted. No forced entry, boss. Detective Sarah Chun, Corbin's relatively new partner, stated, her voice hushed, her flashlight beam sweeping across the impeccably neat living room. She was sharper than her 5 years on the force suggested, her mind a steel trap, her eyes missing nothing. Neighbors heard nothing. She was last seen at her book club meeting yesterday evening. Got home around 9. Corbin grunted, his gaze fixed on Eleanor. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, a single devastating blow. Yet, what truly unnerved him was not the violence itself, but its aftermath. Eleanor's hands were clasped over her chest, almost reverently, holding a single dried rose, its petals a dark, almost black crimson. Her silver hair, usually pulled back in a severe bun, was fanned out around her head, as if arranged. And then there was the cut. A precise, shallow incision, no more than an inch long, running along the inside of her left wrist post-mortem. It wasn't deep enough to be fatal, nor did it appear to be a defensive wound. It was deliberate, a signature, perhaps. A single, clean cut, Corbin murmured, more to himself than Sean. He'd seen plenty of crime scenes in his time, but this felt different. Too neat, too quiet, too artistic. And the rose. Me says it's post-mortem, the cut, Chin added, consulting her notepad. And the rose, too. Placed there after. No blood on it, obviously. So, he kills her, then takes his time, arranging her? Corbin ran a hand over his tired face. The idea made his skin crawl. This wasn't a crime of passion, nor a robbery gone wrong. This was something colder, more calculated. The missing item. A small silver locket, always worn around her neck, now gone. No, not robbery. A specific kind of theft. The next victim, Arthur Jenkins, was discovered 4 days later. A 70-year-old retired architect, found in his craftsman home in Los Feliz. Same MO. No forced entry, single fatal blow, a post-mortem incision on the ankle this time, and a small antique compass, his prized possession, missing from his mantelpiece. And the object, a single, meticulously folded origami crane, placed delicately on his chest. The pattern, nascent yet terrifyingly clear, began to crystallize. Los Angeles was not just dealing with a murderer, it was dealing with a ghost. Someone who slipped into homes unseen, left a grisly tableau, and vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the cold art of death. The media, initially cautious, exploded. The Midnight Sculptor, they dubbed him, a name that perfectly captured the chilling precision and macabre artistry of his kills. Captain Elena Rodriguez, a no-nonsense woman with eyes that had seen too much, called an emergency task force meeting. The room in Parker Center hummed with a desperate energy. Maps of LA were plastered across whiteboards, red pins marking the crime scenes, forming an unnerving constellation. 2 victims, Captain. Corbin briefed the room, his voice gravelly from lack of sleep. Both elderly, living alone. Both found in their homes, no forced entry. Single, fatal blunt force trauma. Post-mortem incision. And a specific, personal item taken, replaced with a symbolic, non-bloody object. Dr. Evelyn Reed, an FBI profiler flown in from Quantico, stood beside him. She was an academic with sharp, intelligent eyes, a quiet demeanor, and a mind that delved into the darkest corners of human psychology. This individual, based on the preliminary evidence, is highly organized, meticulous, and possesses an unusual degree of self-control. The lack of forced entry suggests either he knew his victims, or he's an expert at lockpicking, or, more disturbingly, he creates a scenario where the victim lets him in. A ripple went through the room. The latter suggestion was far more unsettling. The idea that this killer could charm his way into their lives, into their homes, added a layer of profound vulnerability. The post-mortem incisions, the symbolic objects, the missing personal items, Dr. Reed continued, tapping a pen against her chin. These are not random acts of violence. This is highly ritualistic. The killer isn't just taking lives. He's crafting a narrative. He sees himself as an artist, perhaps even a judge or a corrector. He's leaving his mark, asserting control, and possibly sending a message only he understands. Corbin found himself nodding, a grim realization settling in. This wasn't just a monster. It was a ghost with a twisted philosophy. The 3rd victim, a week later, shattered the city's already frayed nerves. Helen Carmichael, a respected high school principal in Brentwood, 58 years old, found in her opulent home. The MO was chillingly consistent. No forced entry, a single fatal blow, a post-mortem cut on her right temple. The symbolic object was a delicate glass bird. Broken. The missing item, her antique silver thimble, a family heirloom. But this time there was something new. A note, found tucked beneath the glass bird. It was short, written in elegant, almost calligraphic script on expensive parchment. The world forgets the delicate balance. I remind them of its fragility. The note sent a jolt of ice through the entire task force. The Midnight Sculptor was not just an artist of death. He was a philosopher, a self-appointed moral compass. The fear in Los Angeles escalated into full-blown panic. Neighborhood watch groups sprang up, gun sales soared, and the night became a thing to be endured behind bolted doors and drawn blinds. Children weren't allowed to play outside after dusk. The vibrant hum of LA was replaced by a nervous silence. Corbin felt the weight of the city on his shoulders. The cases were consuming him. He hadn't slept properly in days, his apartment becoming just a place to shower and change. His relationship with his estranged daughter, already strained, suffered further. He saw Eleanor Vance's sightless eyes every time he closed his own. Arthur Jenkins' peaceful, arranged repose haunted his periphery. Helen Carmichael's shattered glass bird mocked him. "We need a break, Miles," Chun said one evening, after another fruitless canvas of Brentwood. They were sitting in their unmarked cruiser, the glow of the city lights painting their weary faces. Something, anything. His victims are too disparate. An elderly librarian, a retired architect, a high school principal. What's the link? Dr. Reed had been working tirelessly on the profile, her office at Parker Center becoming a war room of psychological theories and victimologies. They are all individuals who lived quiet, respectable lives. They were pillars of their communities, albeit in unassuming ways. No overt enemies, no dark secrets, as far as we can tell. So he's targeting good people? Corbin scoffed, leaning back in his chair, rubbing his temples. That's a hell of a profile, Doctor. Helps us narrow it down to everyone. Reed's gaze was steady. Not everyone, Detective. He's choosing them. There's a specific criterion, however subtle, that we're missing. The symbolic objects, the note. He's expressing a worldview. A warped one, but a worldview nonetheless. The world forgets the delicate balance. What does that mean to him? What does fragility signify? They went over every detail again and again. The precise nature of the fatal blows, often delivered with a heavy, yet non-identifiable object. The post-mortem cuts always shallow, always on a different part of the body, almost like an anatomical sketch. The missing personal items always something cherished, something deeply meaningful to the victim. The replacement objects always symbolic, always clean, never bloody. Chun, with her penchant for detail, compiled a comprehensive list of every item. The rose for Eleanor, the origami crane for Arthur, the broken glass bird for Helen. They're all delicate, they're all beautiful, they're all art. He is the Midnight Sculptor, Corbin said, the nickname now chillingly accurate. He's making art out of death. The breakthrough, if one could call it that, came not from forensics or profiling, but from a mundane, overlooked detail. Chun, frustrated, decided to re-interview the first responders at all three scenes. She was looking for anything, any offhand comment, any fleeting observation. It was a young patrol officer, barely out of the academy, who mentioned it during the interview for Eleanor Vance's case. She had a small scratch on her arm, Detective. Fresh. Looked like a rose thorn. I thought it was from her garden. Maybe she brushed against something on her way in. Chun felt a jolt. A rose thorn. Eleanor was found with a dried rose. Coincidence? She immediately called the ME's office, requesting a re-examination of all victims for similar, seemingly innocuous marks. The results came back the next day. Arthur Jenkins had a faint, almost invisible paper cut on his index finger. Helen Carmichael had a tiny shard of glass, practically microscopic, embedded in her hand. All minor, non-fatal injuries, easily overlooked or dismissed as incidental. All potentially inflicted just before or during the initial encounter. He's touching them, Chun breathed, explaining her discovery to Corbin and Reed. He's making physical contact before he kills them. He's not just entering their homes. He's interacting with them. Maybe disarming them, creating a moment of vulnerability or trust. And he's leaving these tiny, symbolic injuries. Corbin stared at the reports, a new, terrifying picture forming in his mind. He's not just a ghost. He's a predator who walks among them. And these are the first strokes of his work. Little preludes to the main act. Dr. Reed's eyes gleamed with renewed focus. This is crucial, Detective Chun. It suggests a pattern of initial interaction, a momentary connection. He doesn't just burst in. He engages. He might even be testing them, gauging their vulnerability or their reaction to a subtle intrusion. The profile began to sharpen. The killer was charming, deceptive, disarming. He sought out individuals who might be more susceptible to a polite stranger, or who lived lives of routine that made them predictable. He didn't just break in, he entered. He wasn't a rampaging brute. He was a subtle manipulator. They now had a new line of inquiry. Who was seen around the victims' homes in the days leading up to their deaths? Not necessarily a suspicious figure, but perhaps someone making an ordinary approach, a delivery person, a canvasser, a repairman. Someone who could plausibly gain a moment of attention. The city remained in the grip of fear, but now, a flicker of hope ignited within the task force. They were no longer chasing a ghost. They were hunting a man who left a very specific, if subtle, trail. The Midnight Sculptor had revealed a fragment of his twisted methodology, and in doing so, had given them a fragile thread to pull. The hunt was on, and it was about to become personal. The thread Chun had discovered, fragile as it was, began to unravel a terrifying tapestry. The task force, invigorated by the new lead, pivoted their investigation. They weren't just looking for a killer. They were looking for a charmer, a deceiver, someone capable of gaining entry without force. The city, meanwhile, remained a canvas of fear. Schools canceled evening events. Restaurants saw a sharp decline in patronage after dark. The streets, usually bustling with the nocturnal energy of Los Angeles, were eerily quiet by 10 o'clock. Parents held their children tighter, checking locks repeatedly. The fear wasn't just palpable. It was suffocating. Corbin felt it press down on him. The faces of the victims, now augmented by the knowledge of their subtle initial injuries, were more vivid in his nightmares. He saw Eleanor Vance, perhaps smiling politely at a stranger at her door, unaware of the death that awaited her. Arthur Jenkins, perhaps reaching for a package, letting down his guard for a fatal second. Helen Carmichael, caught off guard by a seemingly innocuous conversation. Dr. Reed refined her profile. He's likely in his late 20s to early 40s. Highly intelligent, articulate, well-groomed. He presents as non-threatening. He targets people who, based on their lifestyles, might be seen as less guarded or more open to a polite interaction, perhaps people who don't have immediate family nearby, or who maintain a degree of privacy. Chun, following the new lead, painstakingly reviewed traffic camera footage, doorbell camera recordings, and neighborhood social media groups, searching for any unusual interactions near the victims' homes in the days prior to their murders. It was like sifting through sand for individual grains of gold. Mail carrier, delivery drivers, utility workers, canvassers for charities or political campaigns. She rattled off, eyes glued to a screen displaying a fuzzy still from a home security camera. Anyone who could reasonably approach a residence. The leads were overwhelming and mostly dead ends. Everyone had an alibi, or their interactions were too brief to be significant. The Midnight Sculptor was a ghost still. Then came the fourth victim, 3 weeks after Helen Carmichael. David Miller, a 72-year-old retired astrophysicist, found in his Spanish-style home in Pasadena. The MO was chillingly familiar. No forced entry, single fatal blow, a post-mortem cut on his temple. The symbolic object, a meticulously crafted paper airplane, resting on his chest. The missing item, his antique, personalized pocket watch. The initial injury this time, a faint, almost invisible ink stain on his thumb, as if he'd touched a newly printed document. This victim changed the game. David Miller was not merely a pillar of the community. He was a man of science, a recluse, known for his eccentricities. His murder seemed to diverge from the pattern of quiet, unassuming respectability. Or did it? An astrophysicist, Dr. Reed mused, pacing her war room. A man who explored the cosmos, who sought meaning in the vastness. Yet he lived a solitary life. He was respectable in his own way, but hardly a social butterfly like Eleanor or Helen. Corbin slammed his fist softly on the table. What the hell does he want from these people? What's the link? Chun, exhausted but relentless, came up with a new theory. What if the link isn't their profession or social standing, but something more abstract? What if it's what they represented? Eleanor, the keeper of stories. Arthur, the builder of dreams. Helen, the shaper of young minds. David, the explorer of the unknown. And what does that have to do with the delicate balance? Corbin pressed, frustration mounting. Dr. Reed's eyes narrowed. The symbolic objects, too, hint at this. A rose beauty, life, fragility. An origami crane piece, hope, transformation. A broken glass bird, shattered innocence, perhaps a broken dream. A paper airplane flight, exploration, but also something easily crumpled, easily lost. The puzzle was beginning to reveal a horrific meta-narrative. The killer wasn't just picking victims, he was picking ideas. He was deconstructing what they stood for, then rebuilding them in his own grotesque vision. The stress was eating away at Corbin. He found himself lashing out at Chun more often, then immediately regretting it. His sleep offered no respite, only vivid nightmares of the victims, their eyes silently pleading. He started drinking a little more, a dangerous habit he thought he'd left behind years ago. Chun, seeing his struggle, remained a steady force. She brought him coffee, shared her observations calmly, and pushed him to keep looking, even when despair threatened to overwhelm them both. She noticed the slight tremor in his hands, the deeper shadows under his eyes. "Miles," she said gently one evening, as they reviewed the Miller case for the 20th time. "You need a break, even an hour." He shook his head. "Can't, Sarah. This son of a bitch. He's laughing at us. He's out there enjoying this. We need to find him." The investigation broadened. Detectives fanned out across the city, interviewing anyone who had interacted with the victims in the preceding weeks. They searched for door-to-door salesmen, surveyors, even religious canvassers. The police hotline became a flood of tips, most of them useless, fueled by public paranoia. Every polite stranger became a suspect. One day, while reviewing old case files for any similar, unsolved murders, Corbin stumbled upon something that sent a shiver down his spine. 5 years prior, a series of home invasions in the valley had left 3 individuals dead, all elderly. The MO was different: blunt force trauma, but with signs of forced entry and robbery as the clear motive. Yet, there was a faint, almost subconscious echo. The age of the victims, their solitary lives. He dismissed it, but the thought lingered. What if he started differently? Corbin mused to Reed, showing her the old files. What if he wasn't always this refined? What if he evolved? Reed studied the files, her brow furrowed. It's possible. Serial killers often refine their MO. They learn, they adapt. But the change from simple robbery to this complex ritual is a significant leap. It suggests a major psychological shift, a defining event that transformed his motivations and methods. This theory, however, opened up a terrifying new possibility, that the sculptor was not just an emerging threat, but an evolving one. He was learning, adapting, perfecting his craft, and Los Angeles was his canvas. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, an amateur genealogist, a woman named Patricia Davies, who, spurred by the fear sweeping the city, decided to research the victims online, looking for any hidden connections the police might have missed. She stumbled upon a forgotten local newspaper archive. "I know this sounds crazy, Detective," Patricia told Chun over the phone, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and terror. "But I found something. All 4 victims. They were all mentioned in a local paper, the Valley Vista Chronicle, back in 1998. Not together, but in separate articles within a few months of each other." Chun scribbled furiously. "What were the articles about, Ms. Davies?" "Small, community-related things. Eleanor Vance was quoted in an article about saving the local library branch from budget cuts. Arthur Jenkins had his architectural plans for a new community center featured. Helen Carmichael received an award for her innovative teaching methods. And David Miller. He wrote an op-ed piece about the importance of science education for children." Chen's heart hammered. And what was the context? Was there anything else happening around that time? "Yes," Patricia said, her voice dropping. "There was a big news story that year. The collapse of the Valley Vista Community Center. A structural failure during renovation. A construction accident. Several people were injured and one young boy. He died." The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying inevitability. The delicate balance. The fragility. Corbin, Reed, and Chun huddled over the old newspaper articles. The Valley Vista Community Center collapse. A tragedy that had rocked the relatively small, tight-knit community in the San Fernando Valley 25 years ago. A scaffolding collapse, blamed on faulty materials and an oversight by the construction company. A young boy, 8-year-old Ethan Hayes, was killed. His father, a construction worker, had been working on the site and barely survived, sustaining severe, life-altering injuries. The community was devastated. The article cited by Patricia Davies included quotes or mentions of the 4 victims in relation to the community center before the collapse. Eleanor Vance championed the library, which was slated to be part of the new center. Arthur Jenkins' plans were for the new facility. Helen Carmichael was an advocate for the youth programs that would be hosted there. David Miller had given a passionate speech at a town hall meeting, arguing for federal funding for the center's science programs. They were all involved, Corbin breathed, the weight of the realization making him feel ill. They were all part of the dream of that center, and that dream collapsed, taking a child with it. Dr. Reed's voice was sober. Our killer lost something or someone in that incident. Perhaps he was Ethan Hayes' brother or a close friend. Or perhaps he was the injured father or another family member. He sees these victims as having contributed to the delicate balance that was disrupted, the fragility that was exposed, leading to the tragedy. In his twisted mind, they represent the negligence, the oversight, the failed promise that cost a life. The previous victims now made chilling sense. Eleanor, keeper of stories, represented the forgotten history. Arthur, builder of dreams, represented the broken promise of a safe space. Helen, shaper of young minds, represented the innocence lost. David, explorer of the unknown, represented the unfulfilled potential. The Midnight Sculptor was not just an artist. He was a vengeful ghost, systematically dismantling the symbols of a past trauma, meticulously reconstructing them into monuments of his own pain. He was sculpting a narrative of retribution, one life at a time. The task force now had a name, Ethan Hayes. Or rather, they had the starting point for their killer's identity. They began to dig into every person connected to the Valley Vista Community Center tragedy, the families of victims, the injured workers, the disgruntled community members, the construction company employees. Anyone who had suffered, anyone who had lost. The hunt was no longer blind. They had a motive, a specific event, and a list of potential avengers. The fear in Los Angeles now had a face, though still obscured, and a history. The canvas of terror was almost complete, and the final horrifying strokes were about to be revealed. The revelation of the Valley Vista Community Center collapse as the catalyst for the Midnight Sculptor's rampage transformed the investigation from a desperate search for patterns into a focused hunt for a specific individual. The task force, now armed with a history, dove headfirst into the archives, tracing every thread connected to that tragic day in 1998. Miles Corbin felt a renewed, chilling sense of purpose. The fog of generalized fear had lifted, replaced by the sharp clarity of a defined enemy. He saw the sculptor not as a nebulous monster, but as a man scarred by a specific event, now enacting a horrifying, delayed justice. Dr. Reed's profile became even more precise. He's not just a relative of Ethan Hayes. He's someone who felt a profound, unresolved grief. Someone who saw the victims as culpable, not necessarily for the collapse itself, but for the broken promises, the false hopes that surrounded the center. He's taking back what he believes they stole, a sense of security, of balance. The delicate balance wasn't just about the world. It was about his world. Chun meticulously cross-referenced everyone associated with the 1998 tragedy against their current lives. The list was extensive. Families of the injured, families of Ethan Hayes, employees of the construction company, community activists, even reporters who covered the story. It was a haystack, but for the first time, they knew what kind of needle they were looking for. One name kept surfacing, a shadow at the edges of the tragedy: Julian Vance. He was the younger brother of Ethan Hayes, 12 years old at the time of the collapse. He had been at the center that day, playing near the construction site, watching his older brother. He witnessed the entire horrific event. He saw Ethan's death. His father, Michael Hayes, a construction worker, suffered severe spinal injuries and was permanently disabled, becoming embittered and reliant on Julian for care. Their mother, broken by grief, succumbed to illness years later. Julian Vance. He changed his last name after his mother passed, adopting her maiden name. He had no criminal record, a clean history, graduated high school with honors, attended a local community college, studied art and architecture, then disappeared from official records for a few years before reappearing as a freelance designer and craftsman, exactly the kind of person with the meticulous skills and artistic inclination for the sculptor's MO. He lived in a quiet, unassuming apartment in the valley, not far from the site of the old community center, now a memorial park. Julian Vance, Corbin repeated, staring at the grainy photo from his high school yearbook. A serious young man, intense eyes, a shadow already present. A meticulous craftsman, art and architecture background. Witnessed his brother's death, saw his father's life destroyed. He fits the profile perfectly, Reed confirmed, her voice grim. The trauma, the meticulous nature, the artistic expression of his rage, the symbolism. He's not just a killer. He's a deeply wounded individual projecting his pain onto a world he blames for his loss. The plan was set. They couldn't just storm his apartment. The sculptor was too careful, too cunning. They needed to observe, to gather more definitive evidence, to catch him in the act if possible. Corbin and Chun set up surveillance outside Julian Vance's apartment building. It was a nondescript, 3-story complex, typical of the valley. Julian's life appeared outwardly normal. He had a small workshop in his apartment, where they could occasionally hear the faint sounds of sanding or carving. He left for precise errands, bought groceries, visited his disabled father in a care facility. The tension was unbearable. Los Angeles was still on edge, and the press was clamoring for updates. Captain Rodriguez was under immense pressure to deliver. Every day they watched Julian Vance was another day the city held its breath. Then, a new alert flashed on their surveillance screen. Julian Vance was meticulously researching a new target online. A 70-year-old retired judge, Miriam Sterling, who, in 1998, had presided over a minor zoning dispute that allowed the community center construction to proceed despite some local environmental concerns. She lived alone in a quiet, upscale neighborhood in San Marino. He's found his next victim, Chun whispered, her heart pounding. The judge. She represents the legal system that, in his eyes, failed to protect his brother. Corbin felt a cold dread mix with a surge of adrenaline. This was it. They had to act. The surveillance team shifted focus to Judge Sterling's residence. They couldn't directly warn her without tipping off Julian. They had to intercept him. That evening, the air was heavy with anticipation. A full moon hung in the sky, a silent witness. Julian Vance left his apartment around 11 p.m., dressed in dark clothing, carrying a small, unassuming bag. He drove meticulously, observing all traffic laws, heading towards San Marino. Corbin and Chun followed, a silent convoy of unmarked cars trailing behind. The plan was to let him get close, to gather enough evidence of intent, and then to apprehend him before he could reach Judge Sterling. Julian parked several blocks from Sterling's home, melting into the shadows of the tree-lined street. He moved with a practiced grace, a phantom in the night. He approached Judge Sterling's house, his movements precise, calculated. Corbin gave the order. Move in. Now. Suddenly, the street erupted. Flashing lights, sirens. Julian Vance, always vigilant, spun around, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and cold fury. He bolted, not towards the house, but into the dense shrubbery of a nearby park. The chase was on. Corbin, despite his age, ran with a surprising burst of speed, Chun hot on his heels. The park was a labyrinth of winding paths and thick foliage, illuminated by the bobbing flashlights of the pursuing officers. Julian was fast, surprisingly agile. He knew the terrain, weaving through bushes, leaping over benches. He was desperate, cornered. Corbin spotted him near a large oak tree, his silhouette stark against the moon. Freeze! LAPD. Julian didn't stop. He turned, and in his hand, a glint of metal. It wasn't a gun, but a small, heavy, intricately carved wooden mallet, his weapon of choice. He lunged, not at Corbin, but past him, towards a secluded part of the park. Corbin, anticipating his move, tackled him from the side. They hit the ground hard, the mallet clattering away. Julian fought with a desperate, animalistic strength, fueled by years of suppressed rage. He kicked, punched, trying to break free. Chun arrived, helping Corbin subdue him. They wrestled him into handcuffs, the cold metal clicking shut around his wrists. Julian's breath came in ragged gasps, his eyes burning with a chilling mix of defeat and defiance. "It's over, Julian," Corbin panted, pressing a knee into his back. Julian's head lolled. "It's never over. The balance. It must be restored." His voice was raspy, but laced with a profound, disturbing conviction. Back at Parker Center, the interrogation room was a sterile, unforgiving space. Julian Vance sat across from Corbin and Reed, calm, almost serene, despite his capture. He confessed to everything, his narrative chillingly precise. He spoke of his brother, Ethan, his best friend, gone in a flash of dust and splintered wood. He spoke of his father, the strong man reduced to a shell, consumed by bitterness. He spoke of his mother, wasting away from a broken heart. He spoke of the system that failed them, the promises that crumbled. "They forgot," Julian said, his voice flat. "They went on with their lives, proud of their little contributions, while my family, we were shattered." Eleanor, the guardian of stories, she let the most important story, Ethan's, be forgotten. Arthur, the architect, he built on lies. Helen, the shaper of minds, she allowed negligence to shape my world. David, the explorer, he explored the stars while the earth beneath us cracked. He described the sculpting of each crime scene, the meticulous care he took to arrange his victims, to place the symbolic objects. The post-mortem cuts, he explained, were his way of marking them, of showing the world the fragility they had once ignored. The missing items, a piece of their essence, taken as a trophy, a memento of his own warped justice. "I was restoring the balance," he insisted, his eyes devoid of remorse, filled only with a deep, abiding sorrow. "I was showing them the truth of their own brokenness. I was the midnight sculptor, carving reality from the illusion they lived." Dr. Reed observed him, a profound sadness in her eyes. "He genuinely believes he was righteous," she later told Corbin. "He externalized his grief, turning it into a twisted form of moral superiority. He saw himself as a necessary force, a corrective measure." The capture of the Midnight Sculptor brought a collective sigh of relief to Los Angeles. The city, still scarred by fear, slowly began to reclaim its nights. The news was broadcast worldwide, a chilling tale of trauma, revenge, and the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. For Miles Corbin, the case left an indelible mark. He had faced the abyss and peered into the soul of a man driven by unimaginable pain. The quiet order of Julian Vance's life, the meticulousness of his crimes, served as a grim reminder that monsters often wore the most unassuming masks. He saw the fragility of the balance Julian spoke of, not just in the world, but within every individual. Sarah Chun, though deeply shaken by the horrors she had witnessed, emerged stronger. Her instincts sharpened, her resolve hardened. She had stared into the darkness and had not flinched. She would carry the weight of these cases, but also the pride of having brought a measure of justice to the victims. Julian Vance was tried, convicted, and sentenced to life without parole. He remained unrepentant, forever convinced of the righteousness of his morbid art. The Midnight Sculptor was gone, but the shadows he cast lingered, a permanent reminder that even in the brightest, most sprawling cities, the echoes of past tragedies can twist and fester, waiting for the perfect moment to erupt into a new, terrifying symphony of fear. Los Angeles would never truly forget the summer of 2023, the summer it learned the true meaning of a delicate balance.